So it's been about 2 months since the NVIDIA keynote, and I finally have in my hands the GeForce RTX 5070. And these are now available at your local microcenter. Now, the cool thing about this is you get everything that you need for DLSS 4 in terms of high-end performance because, like NVIDIA said, you get the power of a 4090 in a 5070. And that's with DLSS 4, obviously, so using the power of AI to get that performance, but that's actually really cool. And we're gonna do an entire build just for this 5070. So to pair this off, I went with our Ryzen 7 7800X3D bundle. So that comes with the motherboard, RAM, and the CPU. And I went all in on NZXT for our case, cooler, power supply, and even some fans. We're gonna get set up, and why don't we start building? First thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to set up my area here and start opening all the boxes because there's a lot of prep work involved when you start building a PC. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring everything over here and just start opening all of these boxes. Now, I'm actually really excited for this build today because the 5070 is the last of the 5000 series releases for now. And this is the kind of lower price tier version, but you're still getting a lot of performance at that price tier. So this one's really exciting. Now, this has 12 gigabytes of GDDR7 memory, so that's going to do you pretty good for gaming. But this is also actually going to be a really good entry-level GPU for video editing. Now that you have hardware encode decode for 10-bit 422 footage, like HEVC footage that you get from mirrorless cameras, you need all of that hardware acceleration to edit that footage. So this is going to make a really awesome video editing PC as well. Now, a 5080 obviously has twice the media engines versus a 5070, so you will literally get twice the performance when it comes to video editing, but when it comes to gaming and everything else, you're gonna get a lot of performance out of this, and I'm actually really excited about it. So I'm gonna open up some of these boxes, just do some of the prep work here. I like to get my CPU open, my mother box open, and just kind of prep the area, because when you do a lot of builds like we do at Micro Center, there's a lot of little tips and things that just make your life a lot easier and make the whole process a lot more seamless. So I always recommend having a nice big open area to work on so you can just have everything organized. Now, I'll talk more in depth about some of the parts that we're using today as we kind of get to those steps in the build process. Right now, it really just comes down to prep work. So everything's all set. I got everything open and prepped behind me, and this build is going to be very streamlined. Now, the first thing we're going to do is some motherboard prep. So that's going to be putting in our CPU, our RAM, and our SSD. So for the motherboard that we're going to be using today, this is the ASUS ROG Strix B650-A gaming Wi-Fi motherboard. And this was one of the motherboard step-up options available for this bundle. So you get a little bit of extra features and functionality out of this board, and this is going to work really, really well for this build. Now, first thing we're going to do, we're going to put in our CPU, which is our AMD Ryzen 7 7800X3D. And this is still an insanely popular CPU. Yes, the 9800X3D is currently out, but there's still a lot of availability on the 7800X3D. So you still get those 8 cores, 16 threads, that expanded L3 cache, which is great for gaming. And this is going to pair really nicely with this 5070. And just going to open up, show our little socket here. I always like to hold it by the sides, kind of start at the bottom, and just lay it right in. Oops. There we go. And she's all set. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to go straight into the memory, put the RAM there. So we have our A2 and B2 slots, and just the top latches open up. Now for memory, this comes with the bundle, and this is 2 sticks of GDDR5 6000 memory. This is 32 gigabytes total from G.Skill. This is Flare X5, and this is going to be really great memory that you're going to pair off with everything else here. I like to push on both sides, nice good contact. Definitely want to make sure that it's in there really good. Every time I've had any issue with a PC posting, it's always been because I wasn't paying attention to the RAM. When I insert it, see, you can see right here, actually. It looks like I put it in, but if you're not paying attention, this latch right here actually isn't latched down all the way. So you want to make sure you see that. That's the difference. And it did a click that first time for that half insertion there, but you have to double check and make sure it's fully in there. So for our SSD, we have this SK Hynix Gold P31, and this is going to be a blazing fast 2 terabyte SSD. So tons of space for all of your games. And what I was talking about before with, hardware encode decode for video editing. The reason I keep bringing that up is because that's actually a really huge feature. That's something that was really limited to Apple PCs, or it was something CPU bound with like Intel CPUs. So having that on your GPU now, you can take full advantage of that GPU for all of your video editing needs. And this goes in very easily, just like that. And there we go. So before, with a GPU that did not have that 422 10-bit HEVC support, everything was CPU bound. So you had to rely heavily on your CPU to do all the hardware encode decode for video editing. And so now that you can offload it all to your GPU, it gives you a lot of flexibility for what CPU you can use in your system. So now that we have a 7800X3E instead of what would usually be an Intel chip, at least for a video editing PC. Because I really want this to sort of straddle the line between video editing and gaming. Because that's actually what I do. I do a lot of video editing and I do a lot of gaming. So I want a system that can kind of do both. But all of this is to say, with a system like this, everything all in was about $1,700. So $1,700 for what would amount to a really great gaming PC and a really great video editing PC is a fantastic deal. I mean, that's really, really awesome. Me from 5-6 years ago would have been ecstatic for a build like this, for all of my gaming, for all of my video editing. It really would have done everything I wanted it to do. And having that hardware support really saves you in very specific circumstances where, maybe you don't need downtime to make proxies. Maybe you can just use the footage directly because it's an edit that you have to turn around quickly. And every second counts when it comes to video editing. Now on the gaming side, with DLSS 4 and all of the AI upscaling and the frame generation that you're going to get, 1080 with this system, easy. 1440, yeah. 4K, I'm actually really interested. I think we can get away with some 4K gaming with this system. Last thing I'm going to do is some prep work for our AIO. And I'm going to talk about the AIO in just a minute, but the first thing I'm going to do is remove the pre-installed hardware here on the motherboard. So we can get our case, start prepping that a little bit, and then we can just start getting the rest of the system together. We have our NZXT H5 Flow, and I'm actually really excited to use this case. NZXT cases have always looked really nice, and let's pull this off. This one does have a couple of built-in fans. It has one exhaust fan here, and it has one intake fan there. No RGB on these fans. But I'm going to make a couple of modifications to this. I'm going to leave the exhaust fan, but I'm going to remove this intake fan because I'm going to be using this F360, and this is an RGB core fan, so that means that all 3 fans are actually one unit. So this is 360 millimeters, 3 120 millimeter fans. One cable, all 3 fans built in, and it's gonna have some RGB. Because I wanted some RGB to pop on the front through the mesh there. So that front intake is gonna get replaced by these 3. And I might just move this fan down here because you could support 2 fans down there. I'm gonna have our AIO up top. And this case only supports 240 millimeter radiators for the top. You could do a 360 at the front, but I wanted to have it top mounted. That's just a personal preference. So I went with a 240 millimeter, and that's going to be the NZXT Kraken 240. Now this has an LCD screen on the AIO pump, but no RGB on the fans. So the only RGB you're really getting is from the F360 core fans and from a little bit of what's going to be on the LCD screen there. I wanted to have a touch of color, but I didn't want to go over the top. And with our GPU, which is the ASUS TUF Gaming 5070, there's not much going on there, just a little RGB on the symbol on the bottom right of the card. So all in all, just a little RGB on the front fans, a little bit going on with the LCD screen on this Kraken, and that's about it. I wanted to keep it very simple. So I'm going to prep the case, I'm going to take off all the panels and start to get the motherboard installed, get the fans installed, the AIO. This is going to be a breeze. Our front connectors run up here, and this is where your buttons are going to be and some of your front I/O. That's just going to run straight down there, and I'll have that run to the motherboard. All right, so our front panel cables, they're all right here. This is your run-of-the-mill front case cables. You have your USB-C and USB 3 headers. We have a front panel header, and this is a unified front panel header, which is nice. You don't have the little tiny single pin danglies. So this is going to be an easy one. This looks like this is for that front fan that's running there. So I'm actually going to have to take this out. And this is for our HD audio on the front I/O. Your little Velcro straps here. So this little channel is going to be ideal for running all of your cables. I can tell you right now, motherboard's going to come here, down and over. CPU power is going to come here, down and over. So this is a nice little position for that channel. And then over here, we have the rear fan, and this is just a simple header. This connects straight to the motherboard. I'll find a spot for that. I kept saying I was going to take off this front fan. Let me do it now before the case gets too heavy. And this one's going to be a real easy one. Just go in at an angle. So this I/O, especially because the fan is already pre-installed, you got to sort of shimmy it right underneath. A couple of them are lined up. There we go. Line them right up to the posts. Pre-installed I/O plate. Always love to see it. Obviously your 5090, that's the top of the line when it comes to local AI usage, right? Because that has 32 gigabytes, which is a lot. It's a really good entry-level GPU to test out local AI if you haven't gotten into it. LM Studio is really easy to use. It's really easy to install. It's kind of one of my favorite applications for local AI. You just download whatever model you want from Hugging Face, and it just works right away. You can leverage your GPU. It works just fine off of your CPU. You're just gonna, really have to leverage that CPU, and it's gonna be a lot slower than using your GPU, but for toying around and testing out, it's going to work pretty well. Look at that. And now we're all set. So for our power supply, I have an NZXT C850 Gold, and this is an 80+ gold rated power supply, 850 watts, which is a lot more overhead than what we need for this build, but I always like to give myself a little extra room to grow into with these builds. Now this is ATX 3.1, meaning it has the connector that you need for these NVIDIA GPUs, which is that 12 volt 2x6 connector. So that's one single cable that you can run from here to the GPU. The GeForce RTX 5070, I think it's about 250 watt TDP. This one might be clocked a little bit higher since this is the ASUS Tough Gaming, but either way, that's more than enough headroom for what you need with all of this together. So it's gonna work seamlessly. Now, I'm not putting the power supply in just yet. What I am gonna do is install our CPU power cables, because our EPS connector, it's right up there in the top left corner. So if I get the radiator installed, that's going to be a really hard area to reach. So the time to do it is now. And if you have a semi-modular power supply, then you're going to have to shimmy the power supply into place to run those cables in, because you should still plug in these cables before you get your radiator installed, because believe me, it's going to save you a lot of pain down the line. That's going to be one 8-pin, and I believe it's a 4-pin over there. Yep. But it's nice that it has this little latch that keeps them together, because there's nothing worse than trying to plug in your EPS and they keep breaking apart, so you keep missing the connector. At least that keeps it locked in nice and tight. There we go. So it should be this one here. Cool. Plug that right in. That's all set. I'm not going to leave this like this. I'm actually going to wrap it right around. But the first thing I'm going to do is get my turntable. So now I can just take these cables, run them right over the top. There's a whole top channel here. Run this through the side channel here. I was just doing a little quick cable management ahead of time. So I actually ran these power cables through this middle channel right here with the Velcro. Now that I have all that done, we can start working on our AIO. With our AIO, we have a little assembly to do because the radiator and the pump are separate from the fan, so we're gonna have to run all of that. So this is pretty easy. You have these longer screws, they just go right through the holes on the fans, and they just go straight into the radiator. Then we have some short screws, which we're gonna use to mount to the top of the case itself. So I'm just going to pour these all out and start to get this all in place. I think I want the position of the AIO like this. I like having the tubes on the right side there, so it's going to go just like that. So that means when I put the fans on, I want the cables for the fans to go out the back, so it's just going to go straight out the back channel there. So that means mounting it like this, I'm going to have the cables go directly that way. Fans are on. We have our two little fan cables coming out the back, so yep, there we go. Get them right into the channel. So that's going to be a real easy one. I should still have enough room to sort of just pull the AIO cables and those cables through, no problem. Cool. I didn't remove the top panel. So let me take that off now. There we go. What I like about 240mm AIOs, they're a lot easier to deal with than the 360. They're a little bit lighter. So this one is pretty easy to manage. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to line up the screw holes to the channels here, and then I'll just start screwing it right in. I like to put the corners so at least it'll hold up in place, and then I like to leave it just a couple of turns loose. So this allows me, I could use these sort of rails so I can make adjustments to where I want it. Yeah, I'll just make it flush there. With the radiator installed to the case, the next thing we're going to do is get the AIO pump right onto the CPU there. Oh, but the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to clean up these cables here that I ran for the fans. This is hanging loose, so you want to keep a hand on this while you're handling the case, just so it's not hitting anything important. Yep, that's one of the cables. See the other one there. It's all going to plan. Look at that. Just what I wanted. So those cables come straight out. They're not going to be visible from the front at all. It's going to hook up to all the other cables that I want to get in place. And you know what, actually, before I get the AIO attached, how about I just get this little nest started here. So there's a cable here, and this is going to attach directly into the AIO pump. And this is going to kind of control everything all together. So there's a USB header here, so this is going to run back up and down around through the case and plug in at the bottom. This is a fan header, or this might be for our AIO pump. I'm going to double check the manual. And then over here you have your SATA power, because a lot of these do need SATA power. And then this looks like this is going to be for our fans. Okay, so those are all kind of set, and I'll set those aside. So now, keep a hand on that AIO pump. Oh, there's still a little more slack on that fan, so I'll make sure I pull that back. I am going to double check the manual first because I want to plug in the cables that are going into the AIO pump before I get the pump on itself, because that's going to take up some room. And right now I have access to the CPU fan, AIO pump headers, all of those headers. So before that area starts getting really cramped, I want to get this connected now. It is for the pump header. Okay, cool. Sometimes it goes to the CPU fan and sometimes it goes to the AIO pump header. So now it's good to know. And yep, I see it right in there. Probably can't see it on camera very well. It has a little cap on it. I'm just going to remove that. Get a closer look. Yep. Cool. And then for connectors like this and hard to reach areas, these little tweezers in this iFixit kit, I like it because I can sort of grip it on the sides here, and it's a pretty good grip to get it in hard to reach areas. There we go. So now that I have that connected, it's just going to make my life a little bit easier down the line. All right, cool. So now I'm going to get the AIO pump installed, and I have these little standoff pieces. So these just go right over the screw holes of the pre-installed backplate. So this is pretty straightforward. You just position all four of those there. And then we have these little screws. These are actually double threaded on either side. So you can see there's a much tighter, smaller thread and a bigger thread. This is going to go into your mounting bracket. And then this is going to have some screws that we're going to use to tighten down the AIO pump. So let me just get that. There we go. Nice and hand tight. Don't want to over crank it. And so for our AIO pump, actually has thermal paste pre-applied, but we need to change this little bracket here. Press and lock. There we go. Got it. So that's the Intel bracket. And right here, this is the AMD AM5 bracket. So this should go. That was very easy. Nice. All right, so thermal paste is pre-applied, and that looks to be more than enough. That's a good application. So this is just going to go, make sure I got a decent shot of it. This is just going to go right onto those screw holes there, and I'm going to hold this in place, and I'm not screwing it down all the way. I'm just using it to keep it on because there's a little bit of pressure with the tubes trying to push it up and off. And while I'm at it, I'm going to make sure I connect the cable for the AIO pump. I could have done this ahead of time, actually. Screws on the pump, and I'm just going to do a couple of twists in a star pattern. Equally apply pressure across the board. You don't want to crank one side down and not the others, because then that's how you get uneven pressure, which can cause issues. Super easy AIO installation there. Now I'm just going to tidy up those cables at the top. For our AIO, we have this USB header. So again, this is just going to run down and around. All right, so I was just doing a little cable management there, and all that's really left for our AIO is our SATA power, which I'm going to get that going in just a few. But we're at a good point to start getting some of our case cables installed. So again, talked about them before a little bit, but we have our USB-C and our USB 3.0 for the front and our front panel. So this is going to be very straightforward. I got all of the front I/O connected to the motherboard, so our USB, front panel, we have our HD audio, all of that set. I even got this wired up a little bit. I'm just going to clean this up. This is all of our power that's going to the power supply, and then I'm going to tidy this up just a little bit. But yeah, I mean, we're really just flying right through this one. Before getting the power supply, I need to get my F360 RGB core fan installed. So this is going to be actually pretty easy, because this just goes like that. Like that, that's it. And then you just put the screws and you're all set. I have the cable at the bottom because I want that to run through the bottom, and I'll have that connected through over there. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Now I just got to get my screws. 3 fans for the intake on the front here. And then obviously our radiator, our AIO over here, that's going to be our exhaust. And then we have the one exhaust at the back. So that's somewhat balanced. But I'm thinking this case came with 2 fans, right? It came with one 120 on the intake and then one 120 on the exhaust. And I'm thinking we already have this fan kind of sitting around. Why don't we put that fan here as another intake at the bottom? That way we can blow some at the GPU, because we have this mesh here to flow through and flow up. So let's take advantage of it. I'll run our cable through the back. Now, I'm not using any fan controllers for any of this. The AIO is going directly to a USB header, and it's getting SATA power. The other fans are going straight to the motherboard, and I don't have a controller for this guy, so this actually comes with an adapter because they have their NZXT connector here. So this adapter is going to give me what I need for RGB and for fan control. And that's just going to go straight to the motherboard as well. When you're putting your build together, and especially if you're trying to operate on the budget level, a fan controller is something that you might have to put depending on how many fans you want to put into your build. Sometimes your motherboard can support it and you can handle it just fine, especially if they're simple non-RGB fans, then you're all good. But beyond that, you know, it starts getting a little bit more complex, then yeah, you're going to need a fan controller. So for the fan that I'm putting at the bottom here, I'm debating where I want to put it. I'm thinking I'll put it on this side because the pass-through fan for the GPU is going to be on this side, so I kind of want clean air to sort of come this way and get pushed up through that pass-through. Over here is going to be our power supply, and our power supply fan is actually going to be pointing up because it's going to draw some air through this sort of like mesh in this area here. So I don't want to create turbulence between the power supply fan and this fan. So I'm thinking I'm going to put it on this side. But I don't know, let me know in the comments. What do you think? How should I arrange this bottom fan here? Because I'm just using it because I have it available, so why not? And the case comes with these little long screws, and it actually has screw holes already built in for these bottom fans. So this one's actually really easy. You don't need to do the self-tapping screws. This just goes straight into the case. Bottom fan's all set. Now I'm just going to use the cable. I'm going to run this down and then back around. And then for this motherboard, this fan over here is running to a fan header right down here. And then I have another fan header down here, which is being used for the front intake fans. And I have a third fan header right over here. And that is what this is utilizing. And it looks like, yeah, that's all of my fan headers at the bottom are being used. So if I wanted to add any other fans that had to take use of those headers, I would have to try to cram up. I can see one or two up there, and I could use even one of the CPU fan headers if I really, really needed to. But again, this is all to say that when it comes to putting fans and everything together into your case, you do have to put some thought into either a fan controller or make sure you have enough fan headers, and the run is going to work with all of those fan headers, because sometimes you'll have a fan header like kind of here, some on the bottom, a bunch over here, so you really have to kind of plan that part out. So for the power supply, like I said before, it's solid on the bottom here. A lot of cases have mesh on the bottom for the fan to draw air through, but this one actually recommends having the fan point upwards since there's mesh on the side. So something to make sure you keep in mind, that you want to have the fan pointed in the right direction, because if I put it this way, that fan's going to get choked and that's going to create issues with your power supply. So make sure it's pointing in the right direction. So now I can just start plugging all the cables that I need into my power supply. So we have our CPU cables here, run right over there. And then the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get my 12-volt 2x6 cable. This one, I'm just going to plug it in now because I can go ahead after this and start to screw the power supply into place, do a little touch up on these cables in the back, and then that's it. We're basically done and ready to post. So this is very, very easy to build. Oh yes, so our SATA power. Then on the back here, it's just 4 screws. Keep the power supply in place. All right, so now all that's left is some cable management, and then we just get our GPU in. So I have everything running through the center channel here. Front panel cables are kind of coming and looping around. I have the audio cable kind of chained up over here. So all in all, not too bad. Now, I'm not using this bottom area down here, so I'm just going to leave that open so that air can kind of flow through and get pulled in by that fan. If I wanted to add some spinning drives, I do have the room for it, and I have plenty of SATA power to support that as well. Spinning drives or even some SSDs, like 2.5-inch SSDs, you could fit that in here. Why would you want a spinning drive? Well, I was talking about video editing before, and honestly, when it comes to video editing, you need a lot of bulk storage, bulk long-term storage. I mean, in my video editing PC at home, my video editing PCs here, we have tons of bulk storage in every build because you need all that extra storage for all that video. Now, we do also have a backup solution with our network attached storage that we have everyone dump their footage onto, and then we also have an off-site backup as well, because you need that 3-to-1 ratio, right? So all in all, this is looking pretty good, and if you wanted to add anything to it, you have the room for it. All right, so this is a dual slot card, so I'm just going to take out 2 of the covers over here. All right, here it is, GeForce RTX 5070. Very interested to see if we get that 4090 performance, so let's take this for a test drive. Let's get this in. All right, all set. Get our screws back in. All right, so that's all set. Now we just have our power connector. This just goes right in. Easy. I mean, that is it. She is all done. So I'm gonna put on the tempered glass panel and let's get this to post. All right, everything's all set. I got this all packed up. Now it's time to get this guy to post. Power this up. Nice, there we go. You can see right off the bat, a little bit of RGB on the motherboard, a little bit of RGB on the GPU, and then obviously RGB right here on the front mesh. You can see that a little bit. on the camera there, yeah. I like this look a lot, actually. And our LCD display is working. Our liquid is 22 degrees right now, so that's good. Oh, look at that, we're already there. That was fast. There we go. That's always the fun part. Cool. And we made it to the BIOS screen. Everything's looking great. I'm very happy with this build. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to trying out the 5070 and kind of seeing what it can do. But we're going to do that in a separate video. For now, we're just going to wrap up this build and make sure you stop by your local Micro Center because you can get your hands on a 5070 or a brand new build as cool as this. Now stay tuned, we'll do some future videos about some of what's going on with NVIDIA GPUs. We'll do a whole roundup talking about different performance tiers and what you can expect for each tier of GPU. So stay tuned. Make sure you stop by your local Micro Center. And if you don't have a Micro Center near you, make sure to comment #I want a Micro Center near me.